Lying in the Antarctic Circle that rings the southern part of the globe, Antarctica is the fifth largest continent. Its size varies through the seasons, as expanding sea ice along the coast nearly doubles the continent's size in the winter. Almost all of Antarctica is covered with ice. Less than 0.5% of the vast wilderness is ice-free. The continent is divided into two regions, known as East and West Antarctica. East Antarctica makes up 2/3 of the continent and is about the size of Australia. Ice in this part of the continent averages 1.2 miles or 2 kilometers thick. West Antarctica, on the other hand, is a series of frozen islands stretching toward the southern tip of South America, forming an extension of the Andes Mountains. The two regions are separated by the Transantarctic Mountains, a range that stretches across the continent and is sometimes completely covered by ice. Despite all its ice, Antarctica is classified as a desert because so little moisture falls from the sky. The inner regions of the continent receive an average of 2 inches or 50 millimeters of precipitation, primarily in the form of snow, each year. To put that in perspective, much of the Sahara Desert gets twice as much rain each year. Antarctica's wildlife is diverse and unique. It is the only continent on Earth that has no terrestrial mammals, but is home to a range of marine wildlife and birds, including penguins. Despite the diversity of wildlife in Antarctica, there is one striking absence. There are no land predators. Unlike many other ecosystems on Earth, there are no mammalian predators in Antarctica, such as wolves, big cats, or bears. This is a surprising fact, given that predators play a vital role in regulating populations of prey animals in most other ecosystems. So, with its immense size and powerful body, the Siberian tiger prowls the dense forests of eastern Asia in search of prey. Specially adapted for the frigid climate in which it resides, it is a sophisticated predator, capable of taking down almost any other animal, no matter its size. But because of the value placed on its luxurious fur and the supposed medicinal purposes of its parts, the animal is under constant threat of extinction from human activity. Meticulous conservation efforts and protection from local governments will be required to bolster current population numbers. The Siberian tiger is the largest cat in the world. It averages about 3.3 meters, or 11 feet in length, with a tail measuring 1 meter, or 3 feet. Adult male Siberian tigers can weigh up to 320 kilograms, or 700 pounds, while females are significantly smaller, weighing up to 180 kilograms, or 400 pounds. Siberian tigers are the largest and most powerful subspecies of tigers in the world, and among the most powerful animals of any species anywhere. Siberian tigers have a thick coat of fur to protect them from the frigid climates of their native habitat. The fur consists largely of pale orange colorations around the head, legs, and back, plus additional white colors around the eyes, snout, cheeks, and inner legs. The most distinctive feature of the Siberian tiger is the narrow black stripes around the head and body, which provides camouflage and stealth in the forests. However, it has relatively fewer stripes compared to other tiger subspecies. Other distinguishing characteristics of the Siberian tiger include thick paws, short pointed ears, flattened head and snout, a big muscular body, and a tube-shaped tail with black and white markings. It has longer hind legs than front legs, which enables it to jump truly impressive distances in the air to subdue prey. Their long and fearsome claws and teeth allow them to latch on and prevent the prey from escaping. Tigers mainly communicate through their sense of smell and their limited vocalizations. Their long whiskers also help them to navigate close spaces, especially in the dark. However, like many other felid species, Siberian tigers lack a complex social structure. They are largely solitary creatures that aggressively police their territories through either claw marks on trees or scent marks sprayed with urine and secretions. This tells tigers to be wary of intruding on an individual's current hunting grounds. Despite their fierce territorial aggression, these tigers are actually somewhat mobile animals that have been known to travel hundreds of miles at a time in search of homes and mating opportunities. Young adult males, in particular, may move frequently before establishing a more permanent territory. Male and female territories often overlap slightly for mating purposes. The Siberian tiger once occupied a large swath of territory across the modern-day Russia Far East, northeastern China, and the Korean Peninsula, but due to population loss, the subspecies is now restricted to a narrow range around the Sokote-Alin mountain range near the Pacific coast of Russia. It is also possible that the range extends slightly into North Korea and China. These tigers tend to prefer the dense mixed forest around the region. Their distribution appears to be based on the presence of prey in the area. The Siberian tiger is a carnivorous apex predator that feeds almost entirely on meat. Its diet consists primarily of large ungulate prey, meaning hoofed animals, such as elk, roe, deer, and wild boar. Other potential prey includes rabbits, salmon, and even, on rare occasions, bears. They have also been known to feed on livestock in areas where tigers and humans overlap. They prefer to hunt at night when their prey is most active. Despite their enormous size, tigers are silent and stealthy hunters that will sneak up on prey under the cover of rocks and trees to ambush and kill them almost instantly with a powerful bite to the neck. They can also run at top speeds of around 30 to 40 miles per hour for short periods to chase prey. Only a small fraction of ambushes will actually result in a successful kill, so the tiger must be consistently vigilant for good hunting opportunities. They can eat up to 60 pounds of food during a single successful night, but they can survive on far less if they cannot catch an adequate amount of food. The tiger does not usually eat every part of the deceased prey, leaving behind parts of the carcass for other animals. Siberian tigers almost always try to avoid contact with humans, but a few animals have been known to eat people if their traditional prey is absent, or they cannot hunt successfully because they are sick or old. These types of man-eaters are rare, but once they've begun eating human flesh, they often may make it a regular part of their diet. As you can see, Siberian tigers are extremely strong animals and have amazing qualities. But can they cope in Antarctica? Antarctica is very different than Siberia, except for the cold, of course. Antarctica is essentially an enormous desert, thus the reason for a complete lack of vegetation, with the only types of vascular plants except for two on the west coast of the Antarctic Peninsula. The polar biome in the north, as well as the tundra, are not home to Siberian tigers. The northern edge of the boreal forests is their northern limit. Animals that spend any amount of time on Antarctica are semi-aquatic and use the continent as a temporary resting or breeding area. The lack of flora beyond mosses prohibits the residence of any kind of herbivores. It is not simply the cold that prohibits plant life. The shallow soil does not allow vascular plants to establish the extensive root system that provides them with the water and the nutrients they require, along with giving them the stability to withstand the extreme winds there. Even more problematic is the scarcity of water. Antarctica is a vast, frozen desert, very different from the northern polar regions in this regard. Many people are surprised to learn that it does not snow there. So, you don't even have the minimum requirements for a basic terrestrial community, with producers providing a steady food supply for herbivores, and in turn, the herbivores providing a food supply for omnivores, or carnivores such as the tiger. But what if you gave the tiger plenty of food and fresh water? Would it be able to survive? The answer is a resounding no. Consider the fact that nothing stops the tigers from migrating to the northern polar biomes, but instead, their extreme northern limit is the boreal forests. In fact, there are no species of cat, not even the lynx, that inhabits the polar regions of the north. This is probably due partly to the lack of a consistent food supply, and with polar bears filling the niche of an apex predator, there simply isn't enough food to support more. In reality, no cat species is well adapted to cope with the harsh conditions. If they were, they would have most likely moved there in the recent past. There are none at all, not even in the tundra biome, which is slightly more hospitable than the polar biomes. So as far as adaptations, none would be sufficient. Polar bears are adapted to the extreme cold and bareness of the polar biome in a way that Siberian tigers are not. Tigers lack the 6-inch layer of fat that polar bears have, which helps insulate them from the cold. Could Siberian tigers simply evolve this? Possibly, if the necessary biological information was contained in the genotype of the tigers. Adaptations do not come about upon an as-needed basis, but are purely random. And to produce this layer of fat, other necessary physiological changes would need to occur, which without prior genotype information available, would be extremely unlikely to occur. You might ask, what about the sensible adaptation of white fur? Again, does the gene for white fur exist in the genotype of the Siberian tiger? Possibly. So, would the tiger change to a pure white coloration? Possibly. Though again, we find it unlikely, as no truly white tigers have been documented. The tiger's tail would be a disadvantage because it increases heat loss. Is the tiger's tail going to fall off? Only if a random mutation made the gene functionally advantageous enough for it to be passed on to more offspring, and the offspring's taillessness gave them a competitive advantage to reproduce. But once again, it would only occur based on complete randomness. If the gene does not exist for taillessness in tigers, then it would not appear. In conclusion, Siberian tigers do not exist in polar regions because they're simply not adapted to them. And even placing a tiger in a polar region with sufficient food would not allow it to survive. Millions of years ago, Earth's continents sat together as a single supercontinent, Pangaea. Animals of the time could travel across landscapes which are now separated by massive oceans. But when Pangaea broke apart about 200 million years ago, this level of animal mixing came to a halt. It just so happened that the ancestor of today's polar bears ended up in the continental slices that became Europe, Asia, and North America. These ancestors gave rise to North American brown bears 1.4 million years ago, well after Pangaea broke apart. It wasn't for another 1 million years that an albino version of the brown bear evolved and began to thrive in the Arctic, making the polar bear a relatively recently evolved animal in Earth's long history. Polar bears are large, white bears that like cold climates, fatty meals, and long days of hunting. No matter how adorable polar bears look, these animals are not cuddly. In fact, polar bears are ferocious hunters, and they are the biggest carnivores among land animals. For bears, height is usually measured at the shoulder when the animal is on all fours, according to Polar Bear International. On average, polar bears on all fours are 3.5 to 5 feet, or 1 to 1.5 meters tall. But when standing on their hind legs, an adult polar bear may reach more than 10 feet, or 3 meters. Lengthwise, they are 7.2 to 8 feet, or 2.2 to 2.5 meters from head to rump. An adult male polar bear weighs around 775 to 1,200 pounds, or 351 to 544 kilograms. The largest polar bear recorded weighed 2,209 pounds, or 1,000 kilograms, according to Polar Bear International. Females weigh half as much as their male counterparts, at only 330 to 650 pounds, or 50 to 295 kilograms. Polar bears appear to be white, but their hair is actually transparent. The white results from light being refracted through the clear hair strands. The bears can also be yellowish in the summer due to oxidation, or may even appear brown or gray, depending on the season and light conditions. Polar bear skin is black, so it absorbs the heat from the sun to keep the animal warm. Polar bears are found throughout the Arctic and Alaska, Canada, Greenland, Norway, and Russia. In Canada, they may inhabit ice-covered regions from the Yukon and the Beaufort Sea in the west to Newfoundland and Labrador in the east. 2/3 of the global population of polar bears are found in Canada. The world's southernmost population of polar bears occurs along the coast of James Bay in Ontario. These bears typically occupy the coastal regions of the Arctic Ocean and the channels between its many islands and archipelagos. Their habitat changes according to the season. For example, in places where sea ice melts in mid or late summer, all polar bears move to the shore for 2 to 4 months. During this time, they rely on fat stores for survival. Once autumn arrives, they go back to the sea ice. Polar bears depend heavily on sea ice, using it for hunting, traveling, and mating. Unlike other bear species, polar bears are almost exclusively meat eaters. They mainly eat ring seals, but may also eat bearded seals. Polar bears hunt seals by waiting for them to come to the surface of sea ice to breathe. When the seal nears the surface, the polar bear will bite or grab the seal and pull it onto land to feed. They also eat walruses and whale carcasses. Polar bears will search out bird eggs and other food sources, but none of these are abundant enough to sustain the large body mass and dense populations of bears. Polar bears tend to live solitary lives, except when mating, when a female raising her cubs forms a family group, or when many bears are attracted to a food source, like a beached whale. Young polar bears spending the summer ashore on the Hudson Bay coast will frequently play with each other, most commonly with their siblings. Polar bears near Churchill, on the coast of Hudson Bay, are even known to play with chained sled dogs without killing them, which they could easily do. Unlike other bears, polar bears do not hibernate in the winter. They continue to hunt until weather is extremely cold. Then they may seek shelter in a snow den. Since the polar bear is an enormous and ferocious predator, there are no animals that prey on them in their surrounding environment. They tend to have the most trouble with other polar bears, and females will protect their cubs fiercely from males that may be trying to harm them. Humans, however, are by far the biggest threat to the dwindling polar bear population numbers, as they have greedily hunted them from their arrival in the Arctic Ocean in the 1600s. Until the mid-1970s, when international hunting bans fell into place, along with the receding ice fields that are crucial to the survival of the polar bear caused by climate change. They are also heavily affected by drilling for oil and gas, increasing shipping activity, and rising levels of industrial chemicals that pollute the water. The polar bear has a relatively slow rate of reproduction, which means that populations are not only shrinking rapidly, but are not growing quickly enough to sustain themselves. Some experts claim that the polar bear could be extinct from the wild in the next 30 years. The loss of polar bears at the hands of melting sea ice has led some to suggest relocating these beloved animals to Antarctica. The amount of sea ice is shrinking in Antarctica too, but nowhere near as rapidly as in the Arctic. If polar bears are given sturdy ground, might they learn to survive? Often described as a continent of superlatives, Antarctica is not only the world's southmost continent, it is also the world's highest, driest, windiest, coldest, and iciest continent. Antarctica is about 5.5 million square miles, or 14.2 million square kilometers in size, and thick ice covers about 98% of the land. On average, it is 44 degrees Fahrenheit, or 6.67 degrees Celsius colder in Antarctica than it is in the North Pole. The temperature difference would not affect an adult polar bear much, but would make it more difficult for a cub to reach adulthood. Thus, in the end, there would be less breeding partners, fewer offspring, and less chance of the species to survive. While it's true that the Antarctic has an appropriate climate for polar bears and food for them to eat, relocating the bear south is far from foolproof. For one, Antarctica is largely lacking in land predators similar to the polar bear. Without these types of predators, penguins and seals have evolved to be rather confident when hanging out above the water. In fact, when the first people arrived in Antarctica, they noted how the penguins' fearless curiosity made them a remarkably easy food source for shipwrecked explorers. Polar bears in Antarctica would be considered an invasive species. They would devastate penguin populations, as penguins are easily caught, therefore eliminating a long-term food source. Also, the migration patterns of many Antarctica animals would deny polar bears of a year-round food source. It is unlikely that all habitat and nutritional needs for polar bears would be met through all seasons. Another major problem could be the potential pathogens of the disease, which could either be introduced from the Arctic by the bears or be present in Antarctica and threaten the bears. So the food source of the bears could die off from disease, or the polar bears themselves could die off from disease. The darkest possible scenario for this hypothetical move would be for polar bears to destroy all species they could feed on and then become extinct due to lack of food. Climate change will still affect them. A reason people are even thinking of moving the polar bears to Antarctica to save them is because of their declining population, owing to sea ice melting. However, the Antarctic is facing the same problem as well. The Antarctic was losing 40 billion tons of ice per year from 1979 to 1990. The numbers have gone up exponentially. The region lost 252 billion tons of ice every year during 2009 to 2018. This is a sign that the time isn't far when animals living entirely dependent upon the Antarctic environment will face the same problems as polar bears. There are also significant logistical barriers to moving polar bears to Antarctica, since the continent is not under control of a single country. Instead, Antarctica is managed under a treaty ratified by 54 countries. Under this agreement, the introduction of polar bears to Antarctica would require the unanimous support of all member states. Given how challenging it has been to add marine protection areas to Antarctica, it's unlikely a controversial plan to introduce polar bears to the continent would ever achieve the required unanimous approval. Snow leopards are native to the snowy mountain ranges of Central and South Asia. They are considered vulnerable by the IUCN, as there are thought to be fewer than 10,000 left in the wild. This population is expected to decline by around 10% by 2040. Their numbers are in decline due to hunting for their fur, persecution from farmers, a loss of habitat, and climate change. They are shy creatures that are infamously difficult to spot in their natural habitat. Because of this, scientists find it difficult to determine precise population figures. They live for 15 to 18 years in the wild, mate in the winter, and birth their litter of 2 to 3 cubs in the spring. They are known for living in harsh conditions at high altitudes, in places like the Himalayas. But could they survive elsewhere on Earth? Here, we ask the question, could snow leopards survive in Antarctica? Antarctica is the largest desert on Earth. Although it is covered in ice and snow, it has an annual precipitation of just 200 millimeters, or 8 inches on the coast, and much less further inland. There is little in the way of vegetation, and only a few species of animals live there. It is considered one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. But snow leopards are adapted to harsh environments. To determine whether they could survive in the frozen southern continent, we need to consider the snow leopard's diet and habitat. Firstly, diet. Snow leopards predominantly hunt wild sheep and goats. These include Himalayan blue sheep, Himalayan tahr, Siberian ibex, markhor, and wild goat. These prey species are typically within the weight range of 36 to 76 kilograms, or 79 to 168 pounds. But they also hunt smaller animals to sustain them. These can include macaques, marmots, pikas, rats, and voles. They are capable of capturing many of the mammalian species in their ranges. They silently stalk their prey, aiming to get within close proximity before pouncing and biting their neck. They are fast and agile, bounding across steep mountainsides in pursuit of their prey. Their long tails, which can grow over a meter long, help them to keep their balance when traveling at high speeds and making tight turns. Typically, they hunt larger animals once every 8 to 10 days and consume them slowly over a few days. They can cause problems for farmers in the Himalayas, as they sometimes turn to domestic livestock when times are hard. They have been reported entering a corral and killing multiple animals in one go, wreaking havoc on people's livelihoods. Snow leopards are also known to eat vegetation. This mostly consists of grass and twigs. In Antarctica, vegetation is sparse. Where the inland ice sheet lies 4 kilometers thick, there is no substrate for vegetation to grow. But there are areas of exposed rock and soil. Conditions are generally milder along the coastline and towards the west. Lichens, bryophytes, algae, and fungi all manage to grow in Antarctica. There are also 2 species of flowering plants along the Antarctic Peninsula. However, none of these species would be considered edible for the snow leopard, but snow leopards are mostly carnivorous. So what animals could be on the menu for snow leopards living in Antarctica? Mammals that frequent Antarctica include whales and seals. The whales are migratory, traveling to northerly warmer waters for mating and calving. They only need to return to Antarctica's feeding grounds between April and November. However, these huge marine mammals would not be targets for the snow leopards. In fact, no marine animals are typically prey for snow leopards. The big cats would have to adapt their hunting techniques to take advantage of the food sources on offer. In the Arctic, polar bears wait patiently at the entrance to seal breathing holes in the ice. When the seal emerges, the bears pounce. Although snow leopards are opportunistic hunters, they are unlikely to be able to capture whales or seals on Antarctica's coastline. Seals swimming in the frozen seas off Antarctica are protected from the cold by a thick layer of blubber. In the Arctic, it is this fat that is highly sought after by polar bears. They can eat 45 kilograms of blubber in a single sitting. They rely on it to insulate their own bodies and provide them with long-term energy for leaner times ahead. When food is plentiful, polar bears will sometimes only eat the skin and blubber of a seal, while some predators, used to hunting these marine species, rely on blubber in their diet. It is not something that snow leopards are used to. The big cats spend 3 or 4 days consuming the entire carcass of a kill, eating every few hours until nothing is left. The composition of polar marine animals may not be suited to snow leopards. Antarctic animals are significantly different from mountainous animals, such as the wild sheep and goats hunted in the Himalayas. The other animals that could be considered prey for snow leopards in Antarctica are penguins. There are estimated to be around 20 million breeding pairs of penguins in Antarctica. Of the 17 species of penguins found worldwide, there are just 7 that live in and around Antarctica and its islands. But snow leopards aren't adapted for hunting these flightless birds. Although they are slow and cumbersome on land, once they enter the water, their streamlined bodies allow them to swim with great speed and agility. Using their white fur as camouflage against the white landscape, snow leopards would be able to sneak up on their prey in Antarctica before pouncing. However, we do not believe that snow leopards could survive on the food available to them in the Antarctic. It is just too different. The climate and habitat are incredibly unforgiving across the Antarctic continent. No indigenous humans live there, and it is only visited by tourists and scientists for short periods of time. It is the driest, coldest, and windiest place on Earth. The icy plateau in eastern Antarctica can drop to minus 144 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 98 degrees Celsius. Snow leopards live in alpine meadows, which are too cold and windy to support tree growth. The tundra is barren and bleak. In the summer, they live above the tree line, sometimes at altitudes higher than 19,000 feet or 6,000 meters. When winter sets in, they descend to lower altitudes around 6,000 feet or 2,000 meters. Despite living in high altitudes, snow leopards don't seem to have a particular adaptation for coping in the thin air. Scientists initially thought that they may have more efficient hemoglobin in their blood compared to other big cats such as lions that live at lower altitudes. However, this was not the case. It seems they survive by taking deep breaths into their large chest cavity and using their wide nostrils to warm the cold air. They are adapted to broken, rocky terrain, using the boulders and rock faces to conceal themselves when hunting for prey. Their agility matches that of the alpine sheep and goats they hunt, bounding over rocks and climbing along cliff edges. Antarctica's McMurdo Dry Valley are rocky and mountainous, but they are uninhabitable. There hasn't been rainfall there for over 2 million years. Only some bacteria have been found in the valleys living within the rocks or under the glacier. Not only is Antarctica the driest continent on Earth, but it is also the highest. The average elevation is 2,000 meters above sea level. This is due to a combination of elevated bedrock and incredibly thick snow and ice. The mountains consist of numerous peaks above 4,000 meters, particularly along the transatlantic mountain range. Mount Vinson, Antarctica's highest peak, is situated along the Antarctic Peninsula to the west. It stands at 4,892 meters, or 16,050 feet above sea level. Snow leopards can move easily through deep snow. Their paws are large and covered with fur acting like snowshoes. This stops them from sinking into the snow, keeps their feet warm, and makes their footprints silent when they hunt, but they are drawn to the snowy conditions by their prey. In Antarctica, most wildlife is located along the coastline and can escape into the sea if they feel threatened, while snow leopards are adapted to the cold, with fur that is 12 centimeters long on their underbelly, a long tail to wrap around for warmth, and furry feet. The dramatic temperatures in Antarctica may be too much for them. Their noses are broad, with wide nostrils to suck huge volumes of air in at high altitudes and to warm it before entering their lungs. However, despite their adaptations to a cold climate, we believe that Antarctica is too inhospitable for snow leopards to survive. There isn't enough prey of the right species to sustain them, and the conditions are too adverse. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment with what you would like to see in the following videos. Thanks for watching. See you next time!